Tonight, Cuba, behind the curtain. Since the start of the Cold War, it's become an island country frozen in time. Now, as icy relations between the U.S. and Cuba are melting, 8 on Your Side pulls back the curtain and steps into a world we haven't seen for decades. It's a first-hand look at the political, social, and cultural changes about to happen. Cuba, behind the curtain.
Hello, I'm Keith Cate, and this is Centennial Park in Tampa's historic Ybor City. It's a beautiful location, a great space to sit and think about Cuba, its culture, its history, its beauty, its political differences. You know, with travel restrictions easing, we decided to send our reporter Jeff Patterson and photojournalist Bob Hansen down to Cuba for a first-hand look, sort of a fact-finding mission, to see what life is like, the flavor of Cuba, behind the curtain.
It's a nation rich in history, culture, and architecture. Americans haven't seen it for a while, but people from other countries haven't forgotten about Cuba.
Yeah, it's beautiful, you know, you see everybody, the Spanish history.
Burkhard Glubin and his wife are here from Hamburg, Germany.
Tell me why you came to Cuba.
Because of the weather.
Americans can visit. Travel restrictions are being lifted. Steve Rupert from Tampa has offered guided tours here for years.
A lot of people didn't even know you could come down here.
We drove around Havana with Rupert in a 57 Ford Fairlane.
But, you know, that's one of the interesting things about coming down here is it's sort of a time warp. You know, the buildings are old. There's no Americanization. You don't have neon lights flashing anywhere.
There is no question Havana offers many beautiful views.
And yet I look, and a lot of the buildings here are really run down. They're falling apart.
They're working on it, little by little.
So an interesting thing about being in Havana is, even in a beautiful tourist district, people walking all around, you'll find things like this. Probably not to electrical code in the United States, but there are a lot of things here that need to be repaired.
I can see it definitely improving. I think it has no direction to go but up.
Mark Fitzpatrick is an American citizen who travels the world. He's been to Cuba many times, and he sees great business potential here.
Well, tourism. Americans want to come down here. It was the #1 spot, I believe, for Americans in the Caribbean in the 50s, and I think it could probably be that way in the future. I'm sure it will be, actually.
In a square in Old Havana, photos show the process of the ongoing restoration.
What about restoration like this?
Well, I think the whole city needs a facelift. I mean, they need a lot of paint down here, and there'll be major refurbishment for the next 10 years. There'll be one big construction site, I believe.
Well, Jeff's here with us now, and when I see that story, Jeff, I'm thinking this is not exactly what I was expecting to see. What about you?
There were a lot of things in Cuba I think that we weren't expecting to see. When we traveled there, we met a number of people who were anxious for the trade embargo to end, but they are already opening up their homes, their arms, to tourists and business.
In Havana, the streets are alive with music and tourists.
A lot of people I brought here have traveled in other parts of the world, and this is just on their list.
Martha Andreka and Abby Simple are visiting Cuba from Great Britain.
So what do you think of it?
It's interesting.
But they didn't come here expecting to stay in a 5-star hotel.
We don't expect luxury. We expect a basic standard of hygiene and, you know, to be reasonably comfortable.
This is the Hotel Inglaterra in downtown Havana, a beautiful place to stay, and if you want the hotel experience, you can certainly have that. But many people prefer to stay in something called a casa particular, or private home.
For us, the interest of Cuba is staying in somebody's home, getting to know the people, having a different experience.
Joseph Caratala is among the Cubans who are now opening their homes to foreign tourists.
This is your home?
Yes, this is my home.
His home just happens to be on the 13th floor of a building overlooking the Malecon.
This is not average.
No, it is not that average, yes.
The views from his home are breathtaking. The Cuban government now allows private citizens to rent out extra rooms.
It's a very good opportunity to do this kind of work.
Lisette Barrios also rents out rooms in her home.
to get a new life here, no? We can survive a little bit, we can buy what we need, and it's a good opportunity for us.
The Cuban government taxes the extra income, but the rental income is allowing people like Barrios to have a better lifestyle.
Us, yeah.
This allows you to buy more food,
yeah,
a better television set. This
it's
allows you to have nicer things.
It's a small thing that we need, not too much.
The Casa Particulars, where we stayed, and the Paladars, or private restaurants where we ate, are the start of an economy that didn't exist in Cuba just a few years ago, and the start of change here.
Welcome back to Cuba Behind the Curtain. I'm Keith Cate. We wanted to know what's changed since the travel restrictions were lifted. So News Channel 8's Jeff Patterson went to Cuba to find out what people there are saying about the changes.
The flight from Tampa to Havana lasts a little more than an hour. Upon arrival, Cuban customs officials asked us about the purpose of our visit. And then we entered a world that in many ways is frozen in time. Cars on the streets are vintage U.S. makes from the 50s. Architecture predates the cars by hundreds of years. But we found a number of Cubans who are well aware that change is on the way.
That phone call between the presidents, everybody knew it, that something's going to change.
On a street in Havana, Ricardo Hernandez told me the announcement by Raul Castro about a change in the relationship with the United States made history.
When I heard in the news that he's going to speak at 12 noon, no matter what we were doing, we just stopped doing it.
It's a change Hernandez and other Cubans have waited for years to see.
Everybody was dreaming with that, I'm telling you that.
You're looking at Havana Bay and a cruise ship just now leaving port. There are a number of people in this city that believe many more cruise ships can come right here.
My prediction is Tampa will benefit greatly from this just by proximity, just by the fact we're 300 nautical miles due north of there. And in fact, the ports in Tampa are closer than the ones in Miami.
Steve Rupert is from Tampa and has a business taking Americans to Cuba. He sees the change will come slowly.
And the embargo still exists. That hasn't been done away with. But, you know, bits of it will be chipped away.
Okay, you see that, you're thinking to yourself, I'm going to go get a ticket, I'm going to go down to Cuba, I'm going to see for myself what's really going on. But it's not that easy, is it, Jeff?
Not exactly, not yet. You have to have a legal reason to go. There are 10 different categories that currently allow people to travel to Cuba. You can travel down for journalistic reasons, you can travel down for religious exchange, you can travel down for arts and cultural experiences, but general tourism is not allowed.
And even though the travel restrictions are easing, there still is the trade embargo, and I'm sure some businesses here in Tampa Bay and even businesses in Cuba are hoping that maybe this changes as well and the embargo is lifted.
Yeah, there's a lot of hope for that, certainly, but there are still a number of obstacles, legal obstacles, that have to be cleared before major development can occur.
If you want to stay in old-school luxury in Havana, the Hotel Nacional is at the top of the list.
But this was the place to stay. Everyone from Churchill to Marlon Brando to even Walt Disney back in the day stayed here.
On a wall of fame in the hotel, you can see iconic American figures who have stayed there, and one key figure from Tampa.
Well, the Tampa connection is Santo Trafficante.
Mob boss Santo Trafficante stayed here, and so the story goes, even held court during an important mafia meeting.
During the day, the mob had a big meeting here in the late 40s, which is where they decided that they're going to, you know, how they're going to run the casinos here.
But the visits by Americans fell off after the trade embargo took effect. Like many of the buildings we visited in Havana, the hotel is a relic from the past, and there is room for new development. This beach is the beautiful Santa Maria del Mar, one of the most beautiful beaches in the world.
It's a beach that's only 15 miles from downtown Havana, and It's obviously wide open for development. But as with many things, between America and Cuba, there are legal concerns that have to be resolved here before development can take place.
Under the Helms-Burton Act, there are almost 6,000 properties that are disputed. And those disputes will have to be resolved before the embargo is lifted.
There is only one hotel near the beach, a Soviet-era building. And to be kind, we'll just say it has an uninspired design. If the embargo is lifted and the property disputes can be settled, this beach will be primed for new development.
I can tell you there will be changes coming here, but I predict that the real estate issue will be one of the last to get resolved.
We found Cuba to be a place of beauty, but a place that is ready for change. We also found the Cuban people to be friendly and ready to welcome Americans back to their country.
We've taken you to a country that many Americans haven't seen for more than 50 years. And it's one of the first things you'll notice when you go there. The cars, the old cars. Well, now Jeff Patterson shows us what it takes to keep these American classics on the road.
Cuba is a country of great beauty and unique culture. But one thing you can't help but notice are all of the distinctly American cars on their roads. Cars from a bygone era in the United States are a common sight on the streets of Havana.
A Chevrolet, a Pontiac, a Plymouth. American cars built in the 1950s, they look beautiful on the outside, but keeping these cars on the road is no easy job.
On several back streets, we found what amounted to open-air garages with Cubans working to keep their cars running, bolt by bolt. I asked to take a look under the hood of this man's 53 Chevy.
It's not the original manifold.
He doesn't speak much English, but anyone can understand the meaning of his reply.
Original.
Sí. No funciona.
The manifold is from Argentina. In fact, many of the parts keeping these cars on the road come from Mexico. Some parts are handcrafted here in Havana. Many of the vintage cars now serve as taxis for tourists. We rented this convertible 57 Ford Fairlane, complete with driver, to tour Havana.
Right in the center is a statue of Jose Marti.
It's a great way to see the city, and the Cubans are proud to show you their city and their cars.
My car is Chevrolet 1953. This car has 61 years.
Cisneros showed me under the hood. It's a car that some collectors would love to get their hands on.
Is that something you would consider down the road, selling this car?
I will never sell it.
It's not just the fact that the car is now his business. The car represents his family.
This belonged to my grandfather.
And he's not selling.
So if a collector came down here and offered you a lot of money for this car,
yeah,
you would still not sell it?
No.
So if you have a chance to visit Cuba, rent a car, but know in many cases, the car probably isn't for sale.
Now that's fun. Jeff, you have to love the cars.
I think they're really cool, but they are just part of Havana. They are available for rent, though, when you go, and I think it's worth it to rent one for a day just so you can have that experience.
But if you're thinking you want to buy one from one of these folks,
no,
probably not going to happen.
They've been in the families for generations.
Family car.
Yeah.
Interesting stuff. Welcome back to Cuba Behind the Curtain. I'm Keith Cate. And once again, we are in Centennial Park, Tampa's historic Ybor City. It's been more than 50 years since most Americans have been able to travel to Cuba, but there are signs that things are changing. You have the easing of the travel restrictions, but you also have some legislation being introduced in Congress, legislation that could actually lift the trade embargo. And that's one of the reasons we sent Jeff Patterson down to Cuba, to find out what people there are saying about the embargo, about Americans, and about change.
Along the historic Malecón in Havana, the views are breathtaking. The water's so clear, right here at least, that snorkelers come to take in the view.
Este es el Castillo del Morro.
This is the Castillo del Morro, an iconic part of the city.
This is the Malecón, the promenade in Havana. It offers some of the most beautiful views in the city, and tourists come here every day to take advantage of it. Rene's home is just down there, and he looks forward to the day when more Americans can come here and take advantage of this.
This is the most complete part of the city. It's the best part of the city.
What kind of people stay in your home?
I have clients from all over the world, North Americans, Spaniards, Russians.
But Perez is a person who may surprise you. He's traveled the world.
I'm a retired athlete. I competed in professional canoeing.
And during that time, he certainly had the opportunity to defect and leave Cuba, but he didn't. He stayed because he loves his country and hopes Americans will soon travel here in greater numbers to see it.
I have no financial gain from this interview. I just want people to know that there could be mutual respect between both countries if the U.S. Congress wills it.
Since 1959, when revolution brought change to Cuba, waves of Cuban exiles have traveled to the United States. In the 1980s, the Mariel boat lift brought hundreds to the U.S. But not everyone in Cuba wants to leave, even if they have the opportunity.
You know, my biggest brother, he left for economics, you know. He likes money, he likes more opportunities.
We met Ricardo Hernandez on the El Prado in Havana. Hernandez has two brothers who now live in the Tampa Bay area.
How are you able to communicate with them?
We talk on the phone. It's expensive, but we talk on the phone. They call me sometimes. Sometimes they send some money, you know.
But Hernandez told me he has no desire to leave Havana. Like Rene Perez, he's waiting for the day when more Americans will travel here. They both believe life will change.
I think a lot of Americans have the impression that every Cuban would leave tomorrow if they had the opportunity, but Keith, that's not what we found. We found a lot of Cubans who are very proud of their country, but they are anxious for the embargo to be lifted.
But there are those who would say that traveling to Cuba is not a great thing. Lifting the embargo, in fact, is wrong, and that's the rub. I mean, you have this friction that continues.
Yeah, I was expecting some strong sentiment about that when we returned, about our stories, and I didn't get as much as I was expecting, frankly.
Welcome back to Cuba Behind the Curtain. I'm Keith Cate. When President Barack Obama announced that positive things were starting to happen in Cuba, we began to wonder, well, who's going to Cuba right now? Well, Jeff Patterson made the trip, and he actually brought back some good advice for anyone who's heading to Havana.
For years, travel to Cuba has not been easy. When we arrived in Havana, we weren't sure what to expect. But we weren't the only people from Tampa making the trip. Most of the people on our flight have relatives in Cuba, but have lived in Tampa long enough to become Bucs fans. American citizens are not permitted to travel to Cuba as tourists, but it is becoming increasingly easy to go there.
Can the average American come here?
Depending on the type of license you have. If you come here under a cultural exchange, people-to-people license.
Steve Rupert is from Tampa and has been taking Americans to Cuba for years under various licenses. He takes Americans to Havana to see the arts and meet the artists of Cuba.
Well, we go to art galleries, we go to museums.
We went on a driving tour with Steve to see Havana. For the most part, we were able to travel throughout the city and see the people of Havana at work and play. Jorge Luis Garcia Perez is a Cuban dissident now living in America. He believes, for the most part, the picture we saw of Cuba is not accurate.
The tourists that visit Cuba, they don't see the real Cuba.
Perez tells us he was tortured by the Castro government for his views and believes lifting the embargo and allowing Americans to travel to Cuba will change nothing.
I've always said that freedom for Cuba will not come in tourist pockets.
On our trip to Cuba, we found a country rich with history and Cuban people who are excited for new trade opportunities with America.
Right now, you can ask anybody. They're really happy because things are going to change.
That attitude hasn't gone unnoticed by U.S. Secretary of Commerce Penny Pritzker.
What I've been so excited about since the announcement is really the enthusiasm of the Cuban people about the opportunity for normalization of relations.
Cuba is also a country that has a great need for improvements to buildings and infrastructure. Secretary Pritzker is in Tampa to speak with business owners about the opportunity those needs present.
Here in Tampa, ties to Cuba run very deep.
In a one-on-one interview with News Channel 8, the secretary told me even under the current restrictions of the embargo, there is opportunity for business expansion.
The areas right now are telecommunications, agriculture, banking, correspondent banking is allowed.
Would you recommend going to Cuba if you had the chance? Would you recommend others take that trip?
Well, I would, but I think that's something that everyone has to decide for themselves.
I think we've learned a lot. Thank you so much for going, for your hard work. Also to Bob Hansen for taking all of those great pictures. And for all of our co-workers at WFLA News Channel 8, I'm Keith Cate. Thanks for watching Cuba Behind the Curtain.